Hello everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Gaming in the Wild, a video games podcast about games from the interesting artistic side of the tracks, from indie to AAA. My name's John, I'm your host, and this week in Reykjavik, we've had a really beautiful sunny day. I've had a really nice weekend actually. I've been watching football, the Premier League season is back, and I'm playing fantasy football again. I've been playing the fantasy football game since 2006-07, like a fantasy draft where you pick different players and you see what kind of scores they are getting. They get points for goals, points for clean sheets. And I found that it actually gives me a really nice lift of interest in all of the games. So I end up watching games like Fulham versus Everton or whatever, listening to them on the radio, playing some video games, pottering around the house, doing my cleaning. I always care most about the Arsenal game, that's the team that I support, but fantasy football gives me an interest in everything that's going on in the English Premier League. So it's nice to just listen to some games and prepare for the week ahead and just relax and unwind. I also saw a couple of friends and ate some nice food and played a lot of games actually. I've dedicated a fair bit of time to video games this weekend as well. I actually streamed a little bit. I streamed a little bit of Ghost of Tsushima, the open world adventure that I've been dying to play for quite a while actually, pretty much since it came out, but I didn't want to drop full price on it. But it came to PS Plus finally recently, and so I got the PS5 version, and I've been tinkering away at it. I've played 20 hours of it, streamed a little bit of it. It was really fun. Thanks to everyone from the show's Discord who dropped by to chat and watch and talk. So I'm going to talk about that game today. I haven't finished it by any means, but I think I've played enough of it. And I was going to talk about another game this episode. I was going to talk about the freshly minted indie darling cult simulator and roguelike combat game, Cult of the Lamb. But I realized today, as I was preparing for the show, that I've played over 10 hours of that game now. I actually had a crash halfway through it. It was very unfortunate. I've been excited about that game. I've been looking forward to it. And I dug into it as soon as it came out. And I was about 4 hours in when I got soft locked in the cult compound area. And it kind of bricked my save. Like I couldn't get out of the cult area. I needed to do a quest that required some wood and stone and gold. And there is no wood and stone and gold in the compound after you've exhausted it all and harvested it all. And so there was no way for me to complete the quest. And so if you don't know what this game is, it's a really cool looking little game where you play as a lamb who is starting a cult to an imprisoned god. And you have to indoctrinate followers, build them tents and housing, build mines, build like timber workshops, make them worship in your temple. It's a little macabre, but it's very cute. The visual style is a lot like Hollow Knight, but with a kind of a psychedelic edge to it. All line-drawn, cartoony. There's lots of baaing lambs, and there's lots of inverted crosses, and it's this kind of cute, devilish, culty game. And after you've set up your camp and you've got everyone happy and everything is running well, it's like a little bit of a village simulator where you're chopping wood and chopping grass, making beds for people, making sure they're all fed. Then you go into these dungeons, not dungeons, but like dungeon-like areas where you advance through several floors, fight bosses, and try to take down this pantheon of pagan gods and unleash your evil master who has been imprisoned in a kind of a white purgatorial space, and they send you messages and they tell you to do their bidding. It's really, really fun. It's really cool. The music is good. I love the color scheme of it. The gameplay is slick. But unfortunately, at launch, it's got a couple of pretty major bugs. And so I got locked in the compound. I couldn't get out. All my followers started to starve and die because we just ran out of resources. I couldn't complete my quest. And so I ended up just deleting that save. You die if you lose all your followers, and you can't get more followers unless you can get out and find them. So my plans to talk about Cult of the Lamb were a little scotched by the fact that I couldn't play the game. I had to restart it. I'm now up to and past where my game locked, and I'm having a great time with it. I really like the game, but I'm only halfway through, and I realized today that new mechanics are still unlocking. As you progress through the game, you can build more complex buildings that form more complex systems, and there are various currencies, there are various weapons, and the difficulty is like ramping up quite nicely. And I really feel like I'm not quite at a point where I should talk about that game yet. My opinion is still developing on it. I was also planning to have a guest, and I didn't get around to organising that. So I've decided to put a pin in Cult of the Lamb for this week. But I did want to talk about it. It's the game of the moment. Everyone's talking about it in the Discord. It seems to have just taken over Twitter. It seems to have gone kind of viral. But it is suffering from some really quite bad bugs that just end your game. I ended up taking to Twitter and asking if anyone knew how to get out of the compound. And one very helpful person called Rye_Sanity at Rye_Sanity on Twitter helpfully suggested that I go to the devs Discord. So I popped in there, and I have to say I feel for them a little bit. The Cult of the Lamb channel is absolutely popping with people who are suffering from the same bug. It appears that all kinds of quests can soft lock you in the compound and end your game at any point in the game. It's not really a bug. It seems to be more of a design glitch or some kind of design oversight that's allowed the player to become stuck and to lose their game and die. And I think that that's not meant to happen in this game. I thought about, like, is this just supposed to happen? Are you supposed to manage your cult so well that you just don't find yourself in this situation? But it's very easy to wander into this situation, and in the devs Discord there are some mods there trying the best as they can to talk to everybody and to answer their questions. But lots and lots of people are suffering from this soft lock game-ending problem. A friend of the show, Carlos Rodella, who is also reviewing the game for So Video Games, he had the same problem. Narita Boy, one of the regulars in the Gaming in the Wild Discord, also had the same problem and lost his file. So, you know, like half the people I know that are playing it have lost their save file, so I don't think it's intentional. The devs did say that they're aware of the problem, that they are pushing patches all of the time for various bugs that are being reported. So hopefully in a couple of weeks, Cult of the Lamb will be a little more clean. We'll be able to play through it. But in my replay, I have not encountered that problem. I think partially because I am aware of it. And if you play the game a certain way, you can mitigate the possibilities of that happening. So if you just keep hold of your resources, keep a bank of resources, keep your wood stocks high, keep your rock stocks high, and do any quests before you do any building in the compound. When you return from a run, don't just start building all of the exciting new buildings and blueprints that you've got. Do your quests first, and then you won't get soft-locked because your quest will be done. So my second playthrough has been really fun. I'm now halfway through the game. I'm having a great time with it. I do recommend it. But if you're someone that's been sitting on the fence, wondering whether to play it, wondering whether to buy it, I would say, of course, yeah, buy it. I'm playing on a PS5. It's also on the Switch. It's on the Xbox. Not on Game Pass, surprisingly, considering it's a Devolver game. But maybe it's going to be a better play a week or two or a month or two from now. Or you could play it and just bear in mind that you have to do quests immediately or you might get stuck. So I'm going to circle around back to Cult of the Lamb maybe next week. And I decided instead to talk about another game that I've been playing, Ghost of Tsushima. I'm only 20 hours into Ghost of Tsushima, but I do feel ready to talk about it. I think I've seen what I need to see in the case of Ghost of Tsushima, and I haven't in Cult of the Lamb. So that's what I've decided to do for this episode. And that's the game that I'm going to review. But before I do, I would like to say a thank you to the show's newest patron, Blake McKean. This show is patron-supported. There is a lovely Discord community of regular listeners of the show and friends of the show where we all hang out together and we talk about what we're playing. We've been talking a lot about Cult of the Lamb. There's been some chat about Prey. There's been a lot of chat about Returnal. We have some people that absolutely love the game in the server and some that have struggled with it. And so there's been a very interesting conversation going on about Returnal. And if you would like to come and join us, it's always fun to get new members. So thanks very much to Blake for joining. You can come and join that Discord and get bonus episodes and let me know that you support this podcast, that you enjoy this podcast by going to patreon.com/gaminginthewild and signing up for $1 a month or more. It's also nice if people rate the show on Spotify and review the show on iTunes. The podcast is growing all the time and it's really heartening to me. It helps me to keep on going and to see the podcast grow, to see the community grow. So patreon.com/gaminginthewild if you'd like to get involved with that. And with all of that said, let's move on and talk about this episode's featured game, Ghost of Tsushima. So Ghost of Tsushima is a 2020 game by Sucker Punch, the makers of the infamous games, none of which I have played actually. They are a first-party Sony studio, so it's a Sony-published game. It's a PlayStation exclusive. I played it on PS5 and it runs flawlessly. I'm playing it in 60 frames a second at 4K and it rarely differs from that. It runs very well. It's an open-world samurai game. And it was kind of the last hurrah of the PS4 generation. It came at the very tail end of that console, just before the PS5 launched. It got a PS5 version, a next-gen version, a year later or so. So you can now play the director's cut of the game, which has got some extra content and some tweaks and things like that. They added in a few things that people felt were missing and they polished it up for the next-gen consoles. It was in development from 2014 through to 2020, so it was a 6-year development cycle for this one. I was very curious about this one, but I ended up holding on. I didn't quite want to pull the trigger when it was on full price, and that director's cut actually added £10 to the price. So I was waiting for a decent sale when, lo and behold, it popped up on the new PS Plus Extra service, PS4 version, or the PS5 Director's Cut, so I'm playing it on my PS5. And you can get it if you have PS Plus, it's just there to play. Metacritic has this one at 83, which is, it's a good score, but maybe for a big, large-scale Sony exclusive, it's a little on the low side, considering, Horizon came in around the 90s, and considering the scores we've seen for, games like Elden Ring, 83 is a modest score for a game that was made on this scale, you could say. But players give it a 91, and it did win the Audience Choice Award at the Game Awards that year. So players actually much prefer this one to critics, which is interesting. How Long to Beat has the game at 25 hours for the story, 45 hours for extras and 61 for completionists. I've played around 20 hours of the game, but I've been going pretty slow. I think I'm about a quarter of the way through the story, but I've unlocked a lot of abilities for my character, and I've seen a lot of the mechanics and a lot of the gameplay that I think this game has to offer, so I feel comfortable enough to talk about it now. It's not a full, rounded out, having seen the credits opinion, but I'm going very, very slowly in this game, and I think it's going to take a long time for me to get there, if I do at all, and so I think now's a fair time to talk about it, but I will qualify my opinions with the fact that I have not seen credits, and I'm at the 20-hour mark. The devs described this game as Beyond War, Ancient Beauty Endures. Uncover the hidden wonders of Tsushima in this open-world action-adventure. Rise as the ghost to forge a new path and wage an unconventional war for the freedom of Tsushima. My description of this one is, set during a brutal Mongol invasion of a Japanese island, Sony's PS4 swan song is a gorgeous samurai open world. It does everything you'd expect of the genre, but feels like less than the sum of its parts. So this is a review that is going to have some qualified praise for the game, and is going to mine into a little bit of what feels like it's missing in this game. But if you are a fan of Ghost of Tsushima, please do hear me out on this one, and you can always hit me back with your opinions as well. I will mention that I'm on Twitter at Gaming in the Wild, so if you've got thoughts about this game or thoughts about anything that I have to say about it, come and chat to me. I'd love to hear your take on it too. I know a lot of people really love this one, including some of my friends and some of my Twitter friends have heavily recommended it. It is a quality production, no doubt, but for me, and I think evidently for some critics, there is something missing at the heart of the game, and it's interesting to think about, and it's going to be interesting to talk about. I'm looking forward to going through my notes here and talking through the ups and downs of this game and trying to get to the bottom of why such an impressive game perhaps doesn't quite hit the heights that I was hoping it might. But this game is set on the island of Tsushima. It's a real island, a Japanese island, and it's set during an invasion by the advancing Mongol army. It seems like a pretty peaceful island. There's lots of farmers, there's lots of villages, and then there are the noble samurai families who do things like forge amazing swords and uphold their family code of honor and that kind of thing. It is based on true events. There was actually a Mongol invasion of the island of Tsushima. I don't know how that scenario played out in history, but I have heard people talking about how this game does take some liberties with the historical side of things. For example, the katana sword wasn't yet invented at the time of this in the real world timeline. So they've mixed it up a little bit here and they've brought in weapons that might not have been historically accurate at the time. But I mean, it's a video game, that's fine. If it makes the game play better and it gives you that feeling that people are looking for when they pick this game up, I think that's fine. You play in this game as Jin Sakai. You are the son of one of the noble lords of the island. It's a very honourable clan. They look their enemies in the eye. They uphold the law. They resolve situations. They take care of bandits. They try to look after the people. And they try to instill an honour code into their people. And Jin Sakai is quite a rigorous, dogmatic believer in the way of the samurai. And at the start of the game, the Mongol army comes and surrounds the island with ships, and they land. The samurai army charges them, and they are all within the first few minutes of the beginning of the game butchered. The Mongols are greater in numbers, they've got new technological weapons, and the samurais are all but wiped out. And Jin Sakai is wounded, he's unconscious, he is pulled from the beach by a local woman who nurses him back to health. And so you find yourself as Jin Sakai. You don't really know who's alive and who's dead. You know that a lot of people died at the beach, but there is a scattered possibility of people surviving. You don't really know what the state of the island is, but you do know that the island has fallen and that it's occupied by hostile Mongol forces who are mistreating people, who are trashing the island, who are doing the kind of things that invading armies do. And so the game begins there. You are Jin, you have like some bust up armor, you're a shadow of your former self. And so the game plugs in quite nicely, that the narrative plugs into the RPG process of starting with nothing and building yourself up, building up your health, building up your abilities, your arsenal, your armor. There are narrative reasons for it in this game, and it fits very well. An antagonist is introduced, the Mongol warlord. He kidnaps one of your relatives. The woman who saves you asks you to go and save her brother, who is a talented blacksmith who's been kidnapped. And so you start with a couple of pins in your map, and as Jin Sakai, you get a horse, and off you go into the war-torn island of Tsushima. It's a great beginning to the game. It throws you in pretty quickly, I would say. So you don't have to mess around with too much story stuff. It gets you in there, it gets you in the door. And before you know it, as Jin, you're riding on horseback across the beautiful island with mirror-like lakes, with mountains, with red trees all around you, with leaves blowing in the air, with beautiful pampas grass blowing in the wind. You have a couple of missions to do, to go and rescue your brother and to find the warlord, and out you go into the island of Tsushima to find out what has become of your land. And the island is war-torn. If you look around, you can see columns of smoke rising into the air, small campfires, but in the distance, clearly places are burning. There are Mongols on patrol, there are villages that have been destroyed and need your help, there are civilians, there are military camps that have been set up that you're going to need to take care of. Loads of side quests of people who are needing help in this war-torn situation. So there is a great sense of exploration and discovery, and it's always a nice moment in an open world game, I think, when you're set free to just get out there. Happens very quickly in this game. And the first thing that I noticed about it is it's pretty beautiful. Like, the clouds look great, the light is good, the horse really gallops along at a breakneck pace, so you can cover a lot of map. And the map looks great. You can see temples on mountains, you can see forested hillsides with paths going up them, you can gallop down tracks across fields of wheat, and it's a pretty game. You can kind of tell that it's from the PS4 generation. I guess Horizon Forbidden West really moved the goalposts for this genre. And so you can see, even though it's only 2 years old, you can see that it lags quite far behind that game. For example, in facial animations and in detail in the nature and textures and things like that. You can kind of tell that it's not quite cutting edge, but it is a very attractive game. The art design is very good. And I had a good time galloping around this island, just looking at things. And it's something that I really like to do in open world games, is just to explore the nature. And this game does a good job of making like a compelling, beautiful open world with lots of viewpoints where the eye lines are divided. As you look across the island, you find yourself wheeling around the area, crossing obstacles and seeing new vistas. It's all very beautiful. I'm very impressed with the visual side of it. But of course, an open world game is only really as good as what you're doing in that world. And there are a couple of things that I noticed pretty quickly whilst I was playing the game. And that was that this game soaks up a lot of influences from left, right, and center, as all open world games do. They all pick the bits that they like from other games in the genre, and they each develop a characteristic of their own to do with things like how is the combat, how is the traversal, and what is the structure of the activities that you're going to be doing. All of the games handle it differently. People have different tastes in which ones they like, but I would say that while it takes moments from things like Red Dead and Horizon, the game that it reminds me of most, or the games rather, is Assassin's Creed, the open world Assassin's Creeds. This could be an Assassin's Creed Japan game. It's a lot like Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and that's not necessarily a good thing. If you've heard me talk about those games before, you'll know that I do find them to be a little formulaic and a little repetitive. And while I love the detail of the worlds that they create for us to wander through, there is often a feeling that there's a little something missing in those games, that you end up doing the same thing again and again. And in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, this was the best Assassin's Creed game, an open world game of this type, I would say. This kind of slightly grindy leveling up type with a few different tasks that you'll do various different versions of. Assassin's Creed, it took me about, I would say, 20 hours to see all of the mechanics and to start feeling the boredom setting in, as it does with Ubisoft open world games. And in Ghost of Tsushima, that happened within the first few hours, I would say. So let me talk about some of the things that there are to do in this world. First of all, there are field encounters where you will come across a Mongol group. Maybe they're on patrol on horses, maybe they are shaking down some peasants, maybe they are being attacked by a bear. You'll just find them everywhere and you just have a little fight with them, you get some XP and on you go. There's a handful of enemy types. There are big brutes, there are spear guys, there are swordsmen and archers, and they'll come in different configurations. Then there are graveyards that you'll find where you'll fight a few guys and then find some crickets in a little wooden cage. They're collectible. There are enemy camps, all pretty copy-paste, with a leader with a couple of optional objectives such as finding flags or detonating gunpowder. Then there are some quite chill ones. There are fox dens, so you'll find a little fox friend just jumping around under a tree or something. You have to follow the fox, and it will lead you to a shrine, which gives you a little buff, a boon. I think it allows you to wear more amulets that have element or status effects, that kind of thing. There are also hot springs where Jin takes a bath and you get more health. Then he has a little think about his life. You can choose what he thinks about from a couple of options. There are haiku sections where you find like a little kneeling mat, and Jin kneels down and looks at a scene in nature. There might be some trees or a lake or some clouds or some roots, and you can choose a line of haiku by looking at the thing that you want to look at. And so you can kind of compose a patched together bang average haiku based on the nature that you're looking at. And then there is the character stuff. So there are side quests like find a missing person for the farmer, rescue someone's kidnapped daughter, go and pick up an important object from an enemy camp, or take out some bandits that have been raiding the food supplies of a village. These are a little witchery, like you'll have to follow trails, do combat, go and report back and get your reward. And then there are story missions where you'll meet up with characters that you've met along the way. These are punctuated by these cool chapter markers that flash up on the screen, like a movie title. They're quite dramatic. And you know that you've got like 20 minutes or half an hour of this quest. And then a second marker will flash up, for example, Chapter 4, The Butcher, and Jin will come into focus sitting under a tree or looking out across whatever wreckage he's just created, which is maybe a bit of a nod to Red Dead 2, like whenever Arthur respawns, he's kind of just leaning against a tree, chewing on some grass. So there are bits and pieces here from various different games, but I had done, I would say, probably 5, 6, 7 Fox shrines, found 3 hot springs, done a couple of enemy camps, within the first couple of hours of the game. And I started thinking, like, there is not that much variety here. Like, I'm seeing the same activities come in pretty quick succession. Oh, I forgot to mention, there are also temples that are like climbing challenges where the bridges have been burned out from the temples and you have to find alternate ways up to the top and you get a different kind of power up there. So you're going to see a lot of what is in the game, as far as I have gotten in the game at least. Like maybe there are loads of different kinds of activities in the second half of the game, but something is making me doubt that a little bit. I think that this might be roughly it. Like the combat will develop, I think. The combat gets more complex. The scale of the encounters might grow, that kind of thing. But I get the feeling that as far as the open world goes, it's a lot of foxes, a lot of shrines, a lot of hot springs, enemy bases. And that set into a rut pretty quickly for me, a little too quickly. As it's a character-based action-adventure RPG, there is also upgrade system. You can collect resources such as supplies, generic supplies, iron, cloth, animal skins, and flowers. They let you do a lot of cosmetic upgrades, which are, a bit of a hollow reward for gameplay, I would say. I'm never that happy with a cosmetic reward. But you also get to power up your armor, you get to build up your weapons and have them reforged, you get to grow your arrow capacity, things like that. There is also a reputation system that reminds me a little bit of the Mad Max open world game where your legend grows the more things that you do. It's basically XP, but Jin's reputation grows and he gets like different nicknames. You can see him grow in stature. The silhouette of him appears on the screen as his legend grows. And these XP let you unlock new weapons like smoke bombs, throwing knives, bells that you can throw to use as distractions. And then there are stances. This is kind of interesting. There's a few different stances that Jin can take. Like he will maybe hold his sword over his head very purposefully, or stand with the sword extended, like in a fencing kind of stance. There's lots of different sword techniques that you can learn. These give you different movesets that are effective against different people. There's a great water one where he kind of does these cartwheels, these acrobatic cartwheels, and he can break someone's stance to open them up for attack. There's a weapon wheel that you can change your stance in. So you can find the appropriate stance to use against a spearman or someone in armor or a shield bearer, etc. You have to change pretty rapidly in combat, and I never quite got my head around this. I was often using the wrong stance and just seeing my attacks be parried. It was a little bit clunky for me, but the combat has 2 different aspects to it. You can either stealth it or you can just go in all guns blazing. The stealth is a bit basic. You hide in grass, which you can see everywhere. You can assassinate people. You can unlock chain assassinate. You can assassinate 3 people very quickly. Another lift from Assassin's Creed Odyssey. But then in open combat, you have a jumping attack, which is like a flying kick. You can hit R1 to use your special, which will be the bombs or throwing knives that lock on automatically. It's okay. It's you can feel incredibly badass in this game, but just as often I found myself feeling like I was just a little bit lost in the combat, especially when there's a bunch of guys coming at you all at once. I think the combat is serviceable. Some people, I think, get into it more than I have. I've heard people say that they find the combat to be very crisp and intentional, the way that samurais fight, every move matters. But more often than not, I was just dodging away, looking for an opening, going in again, trying to crowd control, trying to get through by the skin of my teeth. I played on normal difficulty, died just a handful of times. Don't really have the patience for the stealth, so I think I often ended up in mob situations, which is maybe not how you're supposed to play, in inverted commas, but it's how I ended up playing it. I would say the combat is serviceable. In terms of movement, the climbing is okay. It's God of War type climbing, so it's marked ledges only. You can also hop over poles in an Aloy kind of way. You can swim, and then you have a horse which has a trot or a full gallop. No canter, which is a bit of a bummer, because sometimes you either have to go dead slow or dead fast. Sometimes you just want to ride it like a nice clip and just take in the scenery, but you can't in this game. Jin, as a character, will sometimes vault over obstacles and boulders, things like that. He can climb a little bit. The movement is, I would say, efficient and functional, but not inspiring. And that's going to be a bit of a recurring theme here. In fact, I would say that is really where my issue lies with this game. Like, everything that I'm describing, you will recognize. It's a mixture of Assassin's Creed, Horizon, God of War, Witcher 3, and even with like a lot of beautiful sunsets and a beautiful world to explore, I quickly felt that there was a little bit of inspiration or soul missing here. And I've been thinking about why that might be. Like, it's a decent open world game. It's a nice world to run around. There is stuff to do. There's plenty to find in the map. There are side quests everywhere, and they're not bad. Sometimes you have to shadow someone or like find the traitor. They're all a little bit varied. So the side quests are pretty good. They're not like A+. They're all right. But I think that what this comes down to is that if we think about Red Dead Redemption 2, Arthur Morgan is a very strong character. In Horizon, Aloy does a lot of the work. She's just a lot of fun. She's a cool character. She's fascinating. Her story is fascinating. Like, where did she come from? Where's she going? Who is she? Why did she appear from the mountain? Where is her mother? How is she related to the scientists of the old world? Arthur Morgan obviously has his kind of moral quandaries that he explores in conversation, and you know that he's like on a sort of out of control ride. And then obviously like Joel and Ellie and the things that go on in The Last of Us, the writing is so deep, the characters are beloved. But here we have Jin Sakai, and Jin is really vanilla. He's a kind of boring guy. He has a point of tension, which I think is supposed to bring the character to life. That is that he has this samurai code. It's really his only characteristic, is loyalty and code. So there's not a lot of emotion going on in Jin. There's not a lot of interest in him. He's a bit one-dimensional. But he's going through this ghost versus warrior system. So the woman who saves him teaches him how to assassinate, and he's like, no, you have to look your enemy in the eye. It's the way of the samurai. And she's like, no, you have to become a ghost. It's the only way to survive. And that's where the title Ghost of Tsushima comes from. You are a samurai who has become a ghost, an assassin who is going to carve a path across this occupied island and become like a terror to the invading Mongol army. I guess that's where it's going. But I don't feel a lot of tension there. Like, the personality of Jin isn't really there. Not enough for me to care about him. Not enough for me to care about him finding his relatives, that kind of thing. And so it's just like a bit of a void at the heart of the game. There's a bit of a yawning hole in the story there. Like, Jin is really just a cipher. Like, Horizon without Aloy would have been, well, I mean, you still would have been able to shoot down giant animal-shaped machines and pick them apart piece by piece with arrows. So maybe Horizon would have been okay if Aloy wasn't so amazing. But here in Ghost of Tsushima, the combat is just sword play, the stealth is just basic stealth. And Jin is not that inspirational. And so if you don't care about Jin, you don't really care about the story. And if you don't really care about the story, then what you're doing ceases to matter to you in a way where it's like a house of cards and one card is missing. And so the whole thrust of keeping the player's interest kind of falls away, I think, for some people in this game. If you are someone that likes to just tick boxes on maps, to run around and explore, and the gameplay is it for you, and you want to get good at that combat, and you want to just play a fun open world game, I think this is probably of a lesser concern. But for me, in an open world game like this, where you're going to be spending tens of hours doing the story, working your way through this world, the narrative and the gameplay have to match each other's pace to hold my interest. I need to feel invested. And I feel like this story couldn't kind of paper over the cracks. Jin doesn't really. And so what you end up with is running around an island, doing stuff, not really minding what's going to come. And so I fell off the game. I go into it for an hour, I run around, I find a fox, I find a temple, I do a side quest and save someone's daughter, I work my way towards the next big boss fight, and I just get bored and stop playing it again. So I don't know if I will ever get to the end of Ghost of Tsushima. I might have had my fill, but I'm going to keep chipping away at it, see if the mood can take me, see if the wind can catch my sails with this game. I want to enjoy it, There is clearly a lot to enjoy here. And I want to be, I want to be in on the fun. I will say that there are two mechanics in this game that do make it stand out. I guess when they were doing the equation of what to include in this game, they were like, well, it's going to need something new. It has to contribute something to the genre. And so there are two systems here that are quite good. There is the standoff system. This is where if you're approaching a group of enemies, you can press up on the D-pad and challenge them to a standoff. You get this dramatic samurai music. You get a little 5-second cutscene of Jin squaring off against the Mongols. And then you have like this quick time event kind of thing where you hold down the triangle button. Jin has his hand on the hilt of his sword, and you have to wait for the enemy to swing at you. And they will try and fake you out. They'll like pretend to lunge. And if you let go of the triangle at the wrong time, Jin will lunge and miss, and you'll lose most of your health. But if you do it at the right time, you will slice them and kill them with one blow. And as you power Jin up, your standoff skills improve. And so you can slice up to 3 people and they come at you. And you hit triangle again. And you do these very purposeful, dramatic sword sweeps that just take people down in one hit each. And I didn't get bored of this. I really enjoyed it. The standoff mechanic is really fun. If you don't manage to stand off, you just have to melee them to death. The second one is the wind mechanic, which you may have heard about. This is a really, actually quite elegant solution to wayfinding in an open world. We've seen a lot of ways that people have tried to do this, whether it's leading your eye, whether it's following a compass to a map marker, whether it's a map that unfogs slowly with question marks like in Horizon. Finding your way around in open worlds is, it's a thing. And in this game, if you swipe up on the touchpad, the wind will blow on screen and you'll see tendrils of wind blowing through the air. It will push the plants and push the grass in one direction, and you know that that's the direction you need to go in. It's very cool if you're riding along at full speed and you're like, am I still going the right way? The path is winding around a little bit. You swipe up, the wind shows you where to go, and you follow the wind. It's a really cool system. And I would say that there is an attempt in this game at a kind of spirituality, like Jin's haikus where he thinks about nature, his hot tubs where he contemplates the nature of what it is to kill, and he thinks about life and death. The communing with nature that you'll do with the foxes, and there are these little yellow birds that appear sometimes and lead you to interesting things. That's another great mechanic. These little yellow birds, you'll hear a bird singing, you look around for it, and it will lead you to something that you may have missed, whether it's a haiku spot or a hot tub or some items that you might need or a weapon that you can pick up, that kind of thing. So there are some attempts here to make it like a game about natural balance, natural order, touching on a Japanese style of spirituality and to the samurai's thought process, the samurai code, and the way that the samurai think of nature and life and death. But somehow it doesn't quite hang together. It just doesn't quite get there for me. It's like the game has the trappings of gravitas, but sadly it all comes off a little trite. There's something not quite missing here, a kind of a coherency or something that feels like real. It doesn't feel real. It feels like a Western samurai movie take on the whole thing. So that the spirituality of the game is another thing that runs a little empty for me as well. So with all of that said, I'm just going to run through some highs and lows of the game. I would say the good things are that it looks beautiful. The mist is beautiful, the sunrises and sunsets, the leaves, the trees, the colour palette. It's all very vertical. The play area feels rich and dense with things hidden everywhere. The scenario of the war-torn island is cool with the columns of smoke. You can just follow your eyes and you know there's going to be something interesting there. The side quests are kind of cool where you're dealing with fallen noble families and you're starting to put together Jin's resistance by finding allegiances and doing quests for people so they'll join your cause. It's pretty cool, you know. The combat, when it works well, makes you feel like a samurai genius. The standoffs are great. You can mix and match throwing knives, your kunai, the charge strike, the flying kick, and then, you know, drop a smoke bomb and then chain assassinate all of the people in the smoke. And when you get it right, it feels incredible. When you don't, it feels pretty bad, like locking onto the wrong guy, not being able to change stance or remember which stance is appropriate. So it's a bit of a mixed bag. It does have moments of feeling great, and maybe if you get better at the game than I am, and if you like that kind of combat, maybe you like it more. I think that the open world touches are nice, like the yellow birds are a great concession to lead you to points of interest. The horse summon is good. The horse just runs alongside you and you can hop right on. There is great incidental music, like a flurry of violin when danger is near, or some like beautiful calm pipe music if you're approaching a hot spring or a shrine. It's little audio cues. So there is a lot of thoughtful touches here. There is a lot to like. It's slick, it's polished, it's completely bug-free. It's 4K and 60 FPS. It looks great. And it's the kind of AAA blockbuster that Sony does best. It's the kind of thing that Sony is famous for. And so if you like those kind of games, if you like those Sony exclusives, then you probably have PS Plus, and I think you should give this one a go. The bad stuff, I guess, I've been over already, but there's a lot of open world repetition, loose combat. The English voice acting is pretty bad, so I played with Japanese and subtitles, which is pretty good. But most of all, it's that lack of soul or magic or, I don't know, special ingredient X, whatever. I don't know what to call it exactly. I'm grasping for the right term here, but just something missing in the heart of the game. And it might well just be that Jin is a shallow character, simple as that, and so the game doesn't quite hang together. So it's missing something to elevate it to the heights of the Red Deads and the Witchers and the Horizons. Not quite here for me, this one. That's Ghost of Tsushima. So that was my Ghost of Tsushima review. If you like the game, please don't hate me. If you have played the game and have a different opinion, I would love to hear from you. You can find me on Twitter at Gaming in the Wild. If you would like to see me streaming games, I've been streaming a little Ghost of Tsushima. I've been streaming a little Cult of the Lamb lately. I'm getting back into streaming. You can find me on Twitch, twitch.tv/gaminginthewild. I'm on all the other social media too. You can find everything, all of the links, all of the different places you can find this podcast, the Patreon link. It's all at gaminginthewild.com. Thank you again to Blake for signing up to be a patron, and thank you to you if that's something that you're interested in doing. It's patreon.com/gaminginthewild for that. And a big thank you to everyone that's left reviews on iTunes or Apple Podcasts and ratings on Spotify. It all helps. I appreciate it very much. That's it for this week. I'll be back next week, probably talking about Cult of the Lamb. Take care of yourselves and each other, and bye-bye for now.